Hi, my name is Alexandra. I go to ACS Beirut, and today I'll be doing my presentation about why the Arab flags are so similar. So, as the presenter's promise, I'm not an expert in flags or vexillology, and if someone here were to know more than me, please correct me and ask questions, as I did my best to satisfy my curiosity about this topic. I'm not trying to persuade anyone of my agenda, and my only hope is that my presentation cultivates your own curiosity. So, as a brief outline, we'll be identifying what are the characteristics that make the Arab flag so similar. So, at face view, what can we see that makes them so similar? Then we have why do they look so similar? We'll be going into the reasoning and the history behind the individual flags and just seeing in a more background way what are the reasons they look so similar. And then lastly, we'll talk about the importance of histories and stories in flags. So, what led me to this? I'll briefly talk about this. I don't want to talk too much about this, but basically, I joined AFIKRA to learn more about the Middle East because previously to last year, I didn't know a lot about this region. The MENA region is still something that's quite unfamiliar to me, but this whole time I've been very interested in flags. So I thought when I joined AFIKRA, what better way to learn than to do through something like flags, where I can look into the individual histories of each of the countries and their flag. What are the characteristics that make the flag so similar? I think the first thing that most people can identify, and it's pretty easy to see that the colors are very similar between a lot of the specifically Middle Eastern flags. This is known as the Pan-Arab colors, and they are red, white, green, and black. Through some of the examples here, you can see that a lot of them use this palette. And there are some who opt out of using black, but they still tend to follow the horizontal striped pattern. And even if they don't use all of the colors, that doesn't make them any less of an Arab country than the others. And with most things, there comes outliers and exceptions. So too does this, and we can see here there are many outliers who don't follow any of the previously mentioned characteristics, but they do share some other characteristics, and that would be the moon and star, which is a symbol heavily associated with Islam. And the story behind it is actually, I find it fairly interesting, is the fact that it originated with the Ottoman Empire and not with Islam at all. But because the Ottoman Empire colonized so much of the Arab region, even after they left, you could still see the influence that they left. And the moon and star specifically, because of the Ottoman influence, became so heavily associated with this Islamic region. And even other countries like Azerbaijan, Pakistan, Malaysia, and Uzbekistan go on to use the moon and star because of its heavy association with the religion of Islam. So why do they look so similar now? First off, we'll talk a little bit about this man called Safi al-Din al-Hili, who was an Iraqi poet from the 13th century, and he is often credited for the inspiration of many of the modern Middle Eastern flags because of his poem which talked about the Pan-Arab colors. Some of the flags today, these are some examples of those who have attributed Safi al-Din al-Hili with the inspiration for their flags. In the order, we have Iraq, Jordan, and Kuwait. Here is the direct quote: "White are our acts, black our battles, green our fields, and red our swords." Nextly, we'll talk about the dynasties. These are some of the most influential caliphates of Islam throughout this history, and most of the MENA region choose their colors based off of these caliphates. We have black for the Abbasid dynasty, green for the Fatimid, white for the Umayyad, and in this case, we use the Hashemite dynasty, but the red in particular tends to differ between different countries, and it's just for Jordan specifically, who Jordanians created the Arab Revolt flag, which will be talked about in the next slide. They used Hashemite to as inspiration for their red in their flag. Here are some pictures of so-called flags for the dynasties, but because they were so far back, oftentimes they are represented with just the blank slate of color that they are associated with. The ones here with designs tend to be more so not necessarily fan-made, but as created so you can differ between the different dynasties. This coin-like symbol is often seen in designs for the Abbasid dynasty, and the stars and crescent again appear for the Fatimid. And then here's a Hashemite flag. So I mentioned the Arab Revolt flag, but what is it exactly? Well, basically, it's probably the farthest back record of a flag that would go on to inspire many modern-day Middle Eastern, North African flags. It was used during the Great Arab Revolt, which was when Jordanians revolted against the Ottoman Empire on the 5th of June 1916. And with British help, they would go on to overthrow Ottoman rule and negotiate independence with the Ottomans. Some key figures like T.E. Lawrence, better known as the Lawrence of Arabia, would be key parts in helping the Middle East and North African region gain their independence. This flag would go on to inspire some very similar nowadays flags. We have Jordan here and Palestine. So some key figures of the Arab Revolt. The first man is Sharif Hussein ibn Ali. This man is the one who started the revolt along with his sons, with the goal of creating a unified Arab state after World War I, which was independent from Ottoman rule. This wouldn't work out due to later complications with the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which brings us onto the next person, Sir Mark Sykes, who is sometimes credited with the design of the Arab Revolt flag, but depending on what source you look at, it's either between him or Sharif Hussein ibn Ali. The Sykes-Picot Agreement is probably something I'm not qualified to talk about because it's a much deeper matter than it's made out to be. But basically, it's what split the rule between, or influence between, Western powers within the Middle East and North Africa. And some even say that it was the first foundation to create the creation of the Israeli state later. And then lastly, we have not someone who's credited with the making of the Arab Revolt flag, but someone noteworthy I'd talk about. T.E. Lawrence. He was a British lieutenant who was sent in to help their Arab Revolt, considering that they were on opposing sides to the Ottomans, part of the Triple Entente. He is known as the Lawrence of Arabia and was a key part of the success in the Arab Revolt, using guerrilla warfare tactics and also taking key cities along with Sharif Hussein and his sons. Here's a picture of the Arab Revolt flag being waved between 1916 and 1918. And then now we'll talk about, quite a few years later, after World War II, the Arab Liberation Flag, which was first flown during a bloodless coup led by the Egyptian army at the time. And one of their key leaders was Gamal Abdel Nasser. This man would later adopt this flag into when he became the second president of Egypt during the United Arab Republic. This white, red, and black horizontal striped pattern would go on to be used in a lot of the United Arab Republic states and adjusted based on the country. So some examples of that are Syria and Egypt, which are the two main countries who were part of this Arab Republic. You can see the similarity between the bottom one and Egypt's nowadays flag. So then some flash facts about the different flags in the Middle East. We have Lebanon. I'd like to talk about the cedar tree. This was actually the thing that first sparked my choice of presentation in AFIKRA. I wanted to learn about the true meaning behind the cedar tree. And I learned to know that it's a representation of longevity and resistance. The Lebanese cedar tree has appeared in the Bible and is associated with the Virgin Mary, who is a symbol of longevity and resistance to decay as well, due to her long living life, due to her pureness. Next up, we have Qatar, whose 9-pointed stripes really interested me because it's unlike any of the other Arab flags other than Bahrain. But the 9-pointed stripes actually are because it was the 9th in the region to gain independence, at least in the Arab region. So that's why they chose to put their 9-pointed stripes on them. And then lastly, I'll talk a little bit about Libya, whose story I actually find a little bit funny because before the 3rd of October in 2011, their flag was fully green. There was nothing else on it. But after said date, they would revert back to their first flag that they had drafted after their independence in 1947. So what's the big idea? Why am I talking so much about flags and why are they so important? Well, generally, I think despite how similar these flags are within the MENA region, their individuality and distinctiveness are a good representation of why the MENA region is so diverse. Despite their shared history and generally just being seen as similar in culture, the differences, even the tiniest of differences, can be seen in their flags, and thus you can see it through their history. The history that made this flag, that made their what it is today. I think that is something very beautiful about this flags in general. The individuality of a flag is such a symbol of unity, which is a little bit ironic. Just like no matter what you're flying a flag for whatever reason, it seems that people of all kinds can unite under this seemingly meaningless piece of cloth. Here are my references. And some further reading, you can check out an infographic which goes on to talk about the flags of the MENA region. And Geography Now, which is a series talking about flags, Flag Friday, and the video link talks about the flag of Jordan. Thank you for listening.